But the top line for me is it's reducing water usage by 99% per unit area, and reducing land in a similar amount. So an absolute breakthrough in agriculture, an absolute breakthrough in terms of not just ag, but in terms of water, certainly in terms of sustainability. It is the light, as it were, or the beacon to watch and to pay attention to. And critically, and Sam will talk about this, no doubt, they've got paying clients. This is an effort that's not truly theoretical. This is an effort that is really surging forward, the one to watch, as it were. So without further ado, I want to welcome Sam Bertram to the podium to take us through, or to take us really inside the largest automated indoor farm in Phoenix. Sam, pleasure.
Thanks, mate. We're good. Beautiful, beautiful. Okie doke. So I will, first thing I'm going to do here is share my screen just to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. We should be now, mate. We good back? We're good? Perfect. All right. Well, nice to meet all of you and all of you online. My name is Sam Bertram. I'm the co-founder and CEO of 1.1. My brother John back there in the blue shirt is the co-founder and CTO. One thing, I had this moustache before Top Gun came out, so I'm not a sellout, I promise you. So John and I both came to the United States to play college tennis, funnily enough. So we both came when we were 18 years old. I came a little over 10 years ago now, and did my background in mechanical engineering and mechatronics. John did his in chemical physics, whatever that means, and electrical engineering. And we came together and we asked each other, you know, look, we're not going to be on Earth for an infinite amount of time. He and I have lived very, very blessed childhoods, and we wanted to start putting resources back into the world as opposed to sucking them profusely as we were as children. So we got our heads together and we really asked ourselves this question. Hopefully it comes up on the screen on time. How do you do the greatest good in the shortest period of time? It's a simple question. The answer isn't so easy. There are lots of answers. There are lots of domains. You have transportation, education, water, energy, all of these kinds of things. The list goes on, agriculture. And barring nuclear power and its economic feasibility, it really came down to the next fact. As soon as John and I sort of came across this notion that 1.1 billion people went hungry in the year 2000, boy, that's going to rock your foundations. You know, if you sit there and you think about what it is actually like to be malnourished, then you multiply that by 1.1 billion individuals, that lands on you. You know, we spend a lot of time in the West worrying about not largely, but many superficial problems. I mean, this is a fundamental problem that exists throughout the world. In terms of its magnitude, it is the greatest problem on planet Earth, in my most humble opinion. Today, still 821 million people are malnourished at the bottom of the socioeconomic stack, and 2.2 billion people at the top of the socioeconomic stack are malnourished, so much so that they are unwell. So this was really the moment for John and I. This was back in 2017. I was, 24, 25 at the time. John, 2 years my senior. And we said, okay, we've got to solve this bloody problem, right? So that was really the origin story. It was contemplating, meditating almost on this fact and understanding, look, if I got 60 years left on planet Earth, let's bloody do something about it. So that was the origin. Now, don't misconstrue this at all. Outdoor farming is not, in my opinion, the problem. Outdoor farming is an absolute miracle. It's an absolute miracle. I think there's so much about our lives, modern day America, that all of these things are miracles. I'm talking to you through, Wi-Fi and bloody fiber and all these kinds of things, right? It's an absolute miracle. So we don't want to spend any time at all denigrating outdoor farming. It really is, as we said, a miracle. But it has a laundry list of problems, an absolute laundry list. So you can go through them for a moment. But as we're approaching that population of 10 billion, we're already running out of water, soil, and land. So there's a lot of hyperbole in the media, as we all may know. But right now, the water problem in California is stopping farmers from growing. The soil problem is stopping farmers from growing. Land rights, labor availability, these are stopping growers from growing. You're seeing a real economic impact from these problems that you're seeing on the screen. The scariest one for me is really the bottom right. 75% of US topsoil is gone. When the Europeans came across the Mississippi Delta, when they first came across it, there was 30 feet of topsoil. I mean, this room is what, 15 feet tall? 30 feet of topsoil. Now it's down to about 3 to 6 inches. And I'm really not trying to scaremonger here. I'm trying to talk about the solution as much as I can. But that's a big problem. That's a big problem. We really don't have that much more land to farm. So when John and I were looking at the problem, okay, outdoor farming is by far and away the greatest source of agricultural products. Greenhouses, if you're familiar with greenhouses, are the process of growing plants under sunlight, but you're inside of a glass house, more or less. There are 90 million square meters of that in the Netherlands alone. The Netherlands is the second or third largest net exporter of produce by value in the world. The United States and Mexico are the only two that hang. So you've got traditional farming, you've got greenhouse farming, both very successful in their own right, both extremely applicable in their own right, but there is still a gap. And this is an important thing to understand. It's the same with energy. If you take our current energy consumption, that's one thing. If you take our annual growth in energy consumption, that's another thing. So when we talk about solar, we talk about wind, I'll give you an example. To keep up with just the increase in energy demand around the world, you would have to build, I think it's 11 Manhattan islands of solar a year just to keep up with that surplus. So when you're talking about agriculture, it's a similar thing. We aren't just talking about what do we have to consume today, it's also what do we have to consume tomorrow. So John and I, it was 2017, and we came across this concept of vertical farming as opposed to traditional farming and greenhouse farming. So what's the difference really between vertical farming and greenhouse farming? Greenhouse farming still uses sunlight. That's a great thing because those photons are free. That light comes through the glass for free. The problem is that light also carries heat that is not free. Dealing with that heat is a significant problem. The major difference between vertical farming and greenhouses are twofold. First of all, we don't use natural sunlight. Vertical farms don't use natural sunlight at all. We use LED light. So that's major difference number one. Major difference number two is we use the third dimension. Traditional agriculture is planar. It's in the X and the Y plane. Greenhouse is planar. It's in the X and the Y plane. What we can do in vertical farming is either stack those planes or in our case, shift those planes onto their side and then stack them up as a row. So what you're looking at here is a previous version of our technology. I won't go through it yet in too much detail. But when one of the major value propositions is 99% less land usage. So if you take a square foot of our warehouse and you take a square foot of a traditional farm, that square foot of warehouse in a 1.1 system is going to produce, depending on the crop, between 150 and 300 times more plants in that single square foot than the outdoor farm. Guess what you're doing to labor? Exactly the same thing. The density of labor in these things would be high, which is why automation is one of the keys here. Vertical farming would not exist unless automation was a very, very strong part of the story. So they're automated. The production of these plants is automated. It's a controlled environment. These plants really never come across situations where the quality or the yield of these products would be degraded. So in the outdoor farm, you have to deal with variations in sunlight, rain, pests, disease, soil composition, all kinds of things. We control the environments. We eliminate a lot of those issues, those external variabilities. We're aeroponic. I'll go through this in more detail in a minute, but aeroponic essentially means rather than the roots drinking from soil, the roots drink from a mist. So if you've ever been to the produce aisle of Sprouts and there's that mist being sprayed onto the produce, completely different use case, believe me, but that's a very similar mist is what's being sprayed at the roots, and that's what allows these plants to grow. Vertical plane, we grow out of walls. So rather than that plane we were talking about before, where a lot of vertical farms stack those tiers, those planes, we shift that on its side, and there's a variety of reasons we do that. LED lights, as I mentioned before, is the source of the light, and then finally AI and machine learning optimization. That requires really high quality data before you can start doing AI and machine learning optimization. But these are some of the key points, and I believe today we got our US patent number after 5 years, so well done, John. So all of those factors I mentioned on the previous page, what did they result in terms of improvements in efficiencies? First of all, the plant grows twice as fast as the outdoor farm. And at the very least, it is no less nutritious. At the very least, these plants are not going to be less nutritious than the products that you're growing on your traditional farm. In fact, the tests we've done in the past have shown pretty much overwhelmingly that the nutritional composition inside of our products is higher for a variety of reasons. 3 times the shelf life. This matters to you at home, but this also matters in a very large way to the retailer. Shrinkage inside of the supply chain, including the retail store, is a big cost for these organizations. If we can extend this shelf life by 3x, which we do, this is a big value proposition for businesses. And I think Dr. Dorsey made a great point earlier, which is the economic viability of these technologies have to be there. I think we go astray very often when we talk about sustainability. We go into the land of, ideas and theory. I think it's really important you've got to have that economic viability. Anyway, 10x the variety. Of the 30,000 edible species of plants on planet Earth, you can only find about 300 of them at any one time in any retail store around the world. Let's dive into those genetics and find what they can do to human health. After all, in the end, this is about human health. We use 99% less water. We use 99% less land. We both know how important both of those resources are. 5% of the food miles of traditional farming. Get this. So imagine the whole United States. I think it was 98% of leafy greens are grown in California and Arizona. 70 to 80% of the US population is east of the Mississippi. You've got to get it from A to B. The average leafy green travels 2,000 miles in the United States. On average, the width of the US is about 2,300 miles. So on average, they're traveling 2,000 miles. Put production where consumption is. That's not possible with traditional farming. With greenhouses, it's tricky. When you completely control the environment, then you can put these farms anywhere. And then finally, 0 pesticides and 0 heavy metals. We as an organization think that pesticides have been phenomenal for the fate of humanity over the last 100 years. But it's time to start stepping beyond pesticides at the same time. All right, I will go, let me see here. The big problem with vertical farming is unit economics. There are billions and billions and billions of dollars that have been spent in this industry to solve this problem that I'm about to walk through here. If you have a $9.54 production price and the average market price for these products is way down here at $4 a pound, you've got a problem. So you might be able to come in and disrupt the herb market above there at $10 a pound or above, but that's not necessarily feeding the masses. So you've got to solve this problem. How do you solve this problem? You obviously break it down, and this is where the mind of my brother comes in so useful. These are the major components of the production price. First of all, you have electricity. Electricity is mainly comprised of LED lighting, dehumidification, and temperature control. It takes a lot of energy to do these things. It's an important thing to discuss from a sustainability perspective as well. Then there's labor. As I mentioned before, you might be packing a whole lot more plants per square foot. You're doing the same thing to labor. So here you see moving these plants around the facility from seeding to germination to adolescence to maturity to harvest to cleaning and then all the way back to seeding and back around again. That's labor intensive when you have 750,000 plants inside of your facility that are cycling on a 20-day cycle. Plant inspection. This isn't so hard if you're just looking at a plant and you've got a notepad, but you've got to have a degree in horticulture or plant science or plant physiology. This is not straightforward. And imagine with the data center expansion, imagine if every single data center had to have a PhD in data science. That becomes a whole lot less scalable. Similarly, in vertical farming, if you're planning to have thousands of farms, you've got to figure out a way to get smart people's eyes in front of those plants in a very scalable fashion. And of course, harvest and packaging. So without belaboring this topic too much, forgive the pun, labor was the biggest component. I'm glad you got it, Dr. Dorsey. Capital costs. So these things are expensive. Now, if you take into comparison how much we produce per square foot versus how much the outdoor farm produces per square foot, we're actually on parity with California. If you had to buy a 150-acre plot or a 1-acre plot, put a vertical farm on 1 acre and a traditional farm on 150, you're spending a lot of money on land that doesn't even bloody exist, right? But these facilities are expensive to build. So in 2017, we knew these things. We came in and we saw, okay, you've got a technology, you've got a farm in a box that you can put anywhere that outputs high quality product with fewer resources. What's the problem? Why hasn't this scaled? This is the reason why it hasn't scaled. Therefore, we had to solve this problem. I'll show you in a second how we solve these problems, but this is just to get a point across. The models that we're working on, our technology, this is just with leafy greens, by the way. I'll obviously expand well beyond leafy greens, strawberries, other flowering crops, and so forth. Once we can get the price of production down the national average, you've got a $15 to $27 billion industry that will it's a complete no-brainer. You're shifting over to a year-round supply, zero seasonality of high-quality product with predictable yields at a lower price. That's that economic viability A and the business case. So for leafy greens, this is what I wanted you to walk through. And this is a story for a lot of other crops as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. All right. My favorite part, the animation. This animation is actually for biopharmaceuticals. One of the applications of this technology is to grow biopharmaceutical molecules. In fact, that may be the way that this technology makes the greatest difference in the shortest period of time. Nonetheless, here we go. So we start with the seed. This is a very important part of the process. Of course, you see there N-benth tobacco. It's kind of ironic. The plant that's done the most damage in human history may also be the plant that does the most good in human history. Funny about that. Anyway, as I said, this is a biopharmaceutical facility animation. What I want to say about the seed, remember that 330,000 thing? That's one thing. There's also all of the seeds that have been optimized over the last 10,000 years, or particularly the last 50 years, to improve yields and improve pest resistance, pest and disease resistance. So we as an organization will be taking seeds from the portion of the industry that's very well understood. We need to decrease risk right now as the developers of these technologies, but understand that in the future, we are going to find all of these beautiful genetics of all of these other plants that will provide all kinds of nutrition for humans. So the seed is ultra, ultra important. The soil point, this is our growth medium. So that point, about 75% of US topsoil is destroyed, and we're destroying it at 10 times the rate that it naturally replenishes. That's a problem. I think I better not speculate, but I think it was 1.9 million acres of land was lost last year. One of our competitors posted that statistic. Thanks, plenty. So this is our growth medium. We use zero soil. Soil is a very, very messy growth medium. I don't even want to go into it. It's so complicated. The microbiome in there is so hard to understand. We don't understand it fully as a human race just yet. So we eliminated the soil from the production process. First thing you think, what happened to the quality? Don't worry, I got you. Don't worry. So then we take that seed we mentioned before and we put it into that growth medium. That growth medium is super duper important, because when I say a statement like replacing the soil, it's not exactly a sort of off the cuff statement. Soil is hard to replace. So this felt has to be able to get a seed wet enough to germinate, allow a root to penetrate through, but not let any light through, and also not let any humidity through the other way. There were lots of requirements on this growth medium. This is a grow board. How imaginative are we at 1.1? A grow board. We could have done better than that. 2 foot tall, 4 foot wide. What you're seeing here, those black spots are the felt, that growth medium I mentioned before, and each of those is an individual plant site. So for a strawberry plant, you would have fewer plant sites because the plants are larger. For a baby green, you would have more plant sites. Let's get into our differentiation. This is something that we do that no one else does, this concept of vertical plane aeroponics. And what does that mean in English? Of course, vertical planes means that the plane of growth is vertically oriented. So rather than growing horizontally like the farm, we flip that 90 degrees, and now we're growing on a vertical plane. One of the main reasons we do this, or 2 main reasons. The first one is when we move the plane of growth vertical, you get better airflow. Hot air naturally rises. Now you can artificially move air past the canopy of the plant, but moving air past the base of the plant is really bloody important as well. Am I allowed to say bloody? I should have checked that beforehand. So that was point number 1. And number 2, you can actually increase the packing factor as well. You can bring these plants in closer together when you eliminate the need for the human being to be walking in amongst these corridors. So that's what vertical plane aeroponics means. In the center there, you're seeing a cutout, a cross section of the root zone. The roots grow into that dark zone where the mist is being sprayed. So it's very dark, it's very humid, and within that mist are the nutrients. And then on either side of those plants, you see the LED light strips. Now, the reason plants are green is because they're reflecting the green wavelength into your eye. They don't really want it. What they really want are the reds and the blues. So we can tailor that light in terms of intensity, in terms of wavelength, to give the plant exactly what it needs when it needs it. That claim of 99% less water is an important one. And I don't think it's necessarily that we're particularly precise. I think that the outdoor farm is slightly imprecise with their application of water. Their unit of measurement for water is acre feet. So we're probably standing in 1/4 of an acre of auditorium, multiply that by 4, fill it up to a foot of water, and that's their unit of measurement, 1 acre foot. Yikes, that's a lot of water. You wonder what the problem is. I think it's 6% of California water consumption is residential, 5% is commercial, and 89% is agriculture. And 30% of that is alfalfa. All right, I'm a nerd, forgive me. So all of the water that's sprayed at these roots that isn't absorbed by the roots arrives in this recirculation tray. And so we can recirculate this water around and around and around and around. We don't throw it away. Only at the end of the cycle will we throw it away, but after it's been cycled for many weeks. And then the leaves, the plants themselves, are also emitting humidity. We squeeze that humidity out of the air to maintain humidity levels, and we can reuse that water as well. So that's why we're much, much more efficient with water. Water as a resource, wasn't on everyone's lips 20 years ago. Now it is. So fortunately, we're much, much more efficient. So those grow boards I mentioned a minute ago, there are 8 of these grow boards on the right-hand side of this column, and there are 8 grow boards on the left-hand side of this column. And there you see horizontally opposed are those light curtains that are providing the LED light. It's important this technology, the hardware, is very scalable. So in the X, Y, and the Z dimension, this technology is scalable. So if you've got a warehouse with a funky shape, if you've got a warehouse with 40 feet or 15 feet, this technology is designed to be able to be built inside of those facilities. I was talking before about the closed environment. That's a huge element of vertical farming, being able to enclose the environment. You dramatically limit pest problems. You dramatically limit disease problems. And these are big problems in the outdoor farm. They're not small problems. But what was that number one problem I mentioned before? Labor. Labor, 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 labor. How do you solve that problem? We look to other industries. The way you solve that problem optimally from our perspective is to have a fleet of robots that perform the functions that humans would otherwise perform. I keep saying humans, I mean to say people. I don't mean to sound like a robot. Anyway, speaking of a robot, as you just saw there, this robot has taken the plants from what would be an area of adolescence, which is a slightly different environment, slightly nicer environment. Then at the end of their life, we take them to a maturity chamber where we blast them with light, increase the temperature, make them cycle a little faster, increase their yield rate per day. So here you see the robot. This is the 8th robot that's come into this column to do that. It drops the last 2 grow boards down into place. 7 other robots did the previous 14 boards, if I can do math in my head fast enough. The next robot comes in to drop the lid. We don't want that mist escaping. We don't want light getting in. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a major kicker. These same robots can visually inspect the plants. Remember that problem before about the data center problem? If you had to have a PhD in every data center, you'd have a huge issue. That's what vertical farming has the same problem. You've got to have an insect, pest, and disease manager, plant pathologist, horticulturist, all of these things on every single location, not scalable, end of story. If you can provide those individuals with the quality of data where they can make any decision they need to make from a remote location, you can solve that problem. What's the number one piece of data they need? Imagery. It's the number one piece of data. You can do a lot with flow rates and temperatures and humidities and these kinds of things to close that loop of information. Imagery is going to solve that problem. The quality of the imagery is important. When we started loading hyperspectral cameras onto satellites to take photos of acreage and determine how healthy they are, more or less, just through light, that made a big impact on outdoor ag. We're doing the same thing, except from being 300 miles away, we're 3 inches away. So you can start to understand the difference in the quality of data. So what's going to happen is when there are thousands of farms around the world, you're going to have plant scientists, horticulturists, the list goes on, in a single location where they are going to be presented with all of the issues that are happening in the farms around the world. Of course, hopefully, most plants are healthy, so the plant scientists won't need to see that data. That data will be taken and stored in a huge data center so we can analyze it further. But this here would be a discoloration anomaly that's picked up by the AI. The AI is looking for shapes that it doesn't like and colors that it doesn't like, and whether or not the leaf is the right size at that period of time, and whether the genetic variability is what we expect it to be. All of these things the AI can learn, but in the beginning, the human has to teach it. So the AI makes a hypothesis about what this issue is. It sends to the operator 2,000 miles away, look, we got a problem, what should we do? Remove the plant and resume imaging in this specific case. So what's nice about all of this, other than that final AI piece, is it all exists and we have paying customers. Isn't that nice to be able to say? We didn't say that for the first 4.5 years of the company, but boy, we got there now. So I'll show you, I'll skip down a little bit and show you a little bit more information here. So this is our farm over in Avondale. This is a 15,000 square foot farm sitting inside of an 80,000 square foot warehouse. We've already sold the first few farms that are going to be built next to that. Our business model is to be the Intel inside. Our business model is not to sell the produce, it's to sell the farms to the individuals who know what to do with the produce, or with the flowers, or with the tomatoes, or with the berries, or anything like that. We want to become the Intel inside. And sneak peek, we become a software company pretty bloody quickly. Anyway, so this is our facility here in Arizona. We've been growing a very, very wide variety of crops. I suppose I will skip up here. This is an example of the imaging bar. This is an RGB version, red, green, blue. So we're not doing the hyperspectral on this bar, but you can start to see really important information can be deduced from these cameras. What is the germination rate? Is an example. Is the germination rate in the center of the board lower than the germination rate at the sides of the board? Is it different at top versus bottom? Once you have this data, you can start to really learn how your system is performing and pick up problems as they occur. Anyway, you got to taste this stuff. Did you taste this, Dr. Dorsey? You did? You've got to taste this stuff. I mean, one of our investors, he's worth like 10 or 12 billion. He said, Sam, for every second of my 62-year existence, I've hated kale until now. And I'm still in the process, we are still in the process of really quantifying why that's the case, but the quality of the product out of this system is insane. We have a 3-star Michelin chef who came to us and said, I just got back from Italy in Genoa. There's a Genovese basil there I'm trying to grow on my farm in Santa Cruz. He can't do it because Santa Cruz and Genoa are very, very different environments. So he asked us whether we can do it. We said yes, tongue in cheek. But we took about 6 months. And then after that, because we can have this environment being so repeatable, we just print the stuff. So we've got some of the highest quality basil on earth that just comes out of our system. And at this point, we barely even need to watch. So that's the Apollo Farm technology. As I mentioned before, we sell these, we license the rights to build one of these facilities to our customers, and we license the software that runs the thing. Keeps all of the environmental set points in the right place, temperature, humidity, airflow, light levels, nighttime, daytime, flow rate, we can go on. And then also services as well as part of these farms. So that difference there, that vertical plane aeroponic thing that we invented, back in 2017 when we swung for the fences a little bit, we didn't know whether this would work at all. I mean, aeroponics had been shown before. We'd seen vertical plane work. Putting the two together and actually making it commercially viable was a big, big question. But fortunately, after many millions in investment in 5 years, we've managed to make it. So this combination of elements is now patent protected as of today. Now, why do these things matter? We say them that they're different, but different doesn't mean better. So vertical plane, that comes down to the airflow and the packing factor, 30% higher yield than horizontal plane. Aeroponics, 30 to 60% higher yield than hydroponics. Why is that the case? There's much more oxygen at the root zone. Inside of soil, roots are constantly looking for oxygen. The leaves are worried about the CO2. The roots are looking for the oxygen. It's part of the reason we till, to get oxygen back into the soil. Hydroponics has a big problem because the roots are sitting in water. So they have to oxygenate that water. The benefit of aeroponics in that mist that you saw is that the level of oxygenation is far, far higher. Therefore, the plant can transpire faster and therefore the plant can grow faster. Automated, table stakes. If a vertical farm right now is not automated, they won't be able to compete. And I don't mean automated, lights on, lights off, pump on, pump off, HVAC on and off. I'm saying full end-to-end automation, plant movement, plant inspection, harvest, seeding, and so forth. And of course, imaging and AI. So now that I've been through about 11 slides, I'll introduce the company. So my brother and I, as I said, we started the company back in 2017. We've raised about $70 million. We began in San Jose, California, but San Jose is a little bit of a difficult place to do business these days. So we moved, we actually did a national search, and it turns out that Phoenix, more specifically Avondale, was the best place to be. What do? We develop automated indoor farming technology, hardware, software, and services, and then we license those things out to our customers. And I'll talk a little bit more in a second about the vision, about where I think, oh, beauty, we're on time, about the vision, about where we want to take this. Mr. Novak Djokovic, Mr. Fred Luddy, two of our largest investors, Mr. Djokovic being a very well misunderstood individual in the United States, but a phenomenal man, just a phenomenal man. If you watch him when no one else is watching, he's doing great things for humanity. So be careful, I suppose, next time we try and judge people from a distance. We've got the second largest berry company in the world, California Giant Berry. Their president sits on our board, the co-founder of YouTube. And look, I'm a 29-year-old idiot. I don't deserve to know any of these people, let alone have these people on our cap table. So John and I talk about grateful people, you know, bloody hell. I mean, we're just normal guys. He's not normal, but we're just normal guys that started a business and we put the blinders on and really shot for it. And we managed to find people that were aligned in that way. What's the vision? I got a little cheeky there. Hopefully Elon's watching. How many do we have on the Zoom? So our vision is planetary plant production platform. As you can see above planetary, it says interplanetary plant production platform. Maybe that's going to take a little while to get one of these on Mars. But this is really the idea. Right now, our platform for plant production is soil. That has taken a very, very, very long time to establish itself. Unfortunately, we have not done right by the soil, and now we need to find a new way to grow plants. And we believe that this technology we're developing is going to be that platform of plant production. Just like cars in 1920s and 1930s, it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve all problems. It doesn't solve all problems for all crops, and it certainly doesn't do it today. So one of the hardest parts about all of this was not just developing the technology, is how on earth do we go to market? What are those high-value crops? What are those geographies that will pay for those high-value crops where we can get the technology out there, herbs, leafy greens, microgreens, we can get the technology out there, get a cash flow positive business, and then expand. And what do I mean by expand? So right now, we're very good at leafy greens and herbs. We're constantly adding in new cultivars. The rate of cultivar introduction hopefully is going to be much faster than 12 and 20. But you can see there, leafy greens and herbs, that's what we've got under our belt. Fruits. We're moving into strawberries. We're currently growing strawberries at our facility over there in Arizona. That's a hoot. Boy, those things taste good. Blueberries, blackberries, grapes. Imagine if we could control the environment with grape production. We could get people drunk. Wouldn't that be great? I'm just joking. So you can start to understand when we apply this technology in this controlled environment, different crops, you can make a big difference. As you'll see, potatoes, carrots, we introduced potatoes into the system by 2025. Are they commercially profitable in 2025? I doubt it. You're not going to be growing potatoes from a vertical farm at Costco in 2025. If I'm wrong, come and knock on my door. Interesting one. N-Ment tobacco, I mentioned before, roses, floriculture, $14 billion industry in the United States. Don't ignore it, it's bloody large. Cannabis as well. I'm not allowed to say anything on a college campus. But John and I, the team, came across the idea of biopharmaceuticals 2 years into the business. And when you think about the value propositions and the hurdles of getting a leafy green solution to market, it's almost orthogonal for biopharmaceuticals. Very, very, very different. And again, to remind you, this is the use of a tobacco plant, tricking that tobacco plant to produce molecules, pharmaceutical molecules, COVID-19 vaccines, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma drugs, eczema treatments. The list goes on and on. It's a massive, massive industry. I believe that's how we are going to make the greatest difference in the shortest period of time. My final slide. Where do I think all of this is going? This is kind of fun. And if you're familiar with the concept of Farmville on Facebook, Farmville was a game where you got to have your own farm and you got to trade with people and so forth. I told you I was a nerd. This concept of personal farming, and it's not just produce. So one day what's going to happen is you're going to be sitting at home and you're going to think, ooh, there's this new crop on the market they've just discovered. I want to plant that in my farm. On your phone, you'll be able to control your portion of our vertical farm or whomever our customer is, their vertical farm. You'll be able to plant what you want. You'll be able to visually inspect how it's going. You may even be able to change the environmental factors to change the physiology of the plant. Eventually, this is where it's going to go. I can't necessarily give you a timeline. We're working as hard as we can. But we believe very strongly that everyone is going to have access to their own personal farm. And that's not just the foods. That's the foods and the medicines. That's non-pharmaceutical medicines, plant-based medicines. That's pharmaceutical medicines as well. You will have a direct connection to your farm that is growing plants specifically for you. Your Apple Watch is picking up a lot of data. And it's only going to start picking up more data as well, particularly when we can start to analyze the blood. So we can start to determine, okay, at 11 a.m. every day, you have a little bit of an iron slump. In your breakfast, you should include some of 1.1's kale to get that, to make sure you don't have an iron slump. This is where it's going. This has been the vision for the business for quite some time. And I believe I wrap it up there. Thank you very much. Any questions, maybe from the Zoomers? And we have a microphone as well, if you have a questions, just so the Zoomers
Them in
can.
the audience. And let's.
Do we have Tim, do you have the microphone, mate? Actually, no, it was down here. Actually, he does have it. Bang. Madam.
Thank you. It's a great presentation, an exciting business. I have two questions, if
Yes.
I may. There we go. We're back. I'm just curious, since you're going to be the Intel inside, how long does it take to build one of these facilities? Granted, they can be all different sizes and shapes, but if you gave us just the example of how long it took you to create the local facility that you have in Avondale.
Sorry, go ahead with your second question. I can get the.
Okay, the second question was just, it was on your earlier slide that it was that the product from the vertical farm has a much longer shelf life. I was
Yes.
just looking for an explanation as to why.
Sure. So the first one, the facility here in Avondale took us on the order of 9 months to build. Way too long. Now, we didn't mention it here, but we've got a couple of technology partners that have deployed similar systems in a different industry in 2 to 4 weeks. So I think, I forget which year it was, John, but McDonald's went from a year from breaking ground to serving burgers to 4 weeks from breaking ground to serving burgers. That's a similar sort of trajectory that we're on now. To answer your question briefly, I would say from break ground to a commissioned facility growing plants, it's going to be between 4 and 6 weeks. That's our goal. And we believe we can do that because we're piggybacking off solutions that we can already point to, right? In terms of the shelf life, a couple of different things. First of all, the plant hasn't been stressed out as much during its life. Second of all, it hasn't been invaded or bombarded by anywhere near as many pathogens. So it doesn't have to deal with that as it's degrading. Keep in mind, as soon as you harvest that product, it's degrading, it's dying. That's my main point. When you harvest produce from the farm, how long does it take to get cold? It takes 2-3 hours before it is first chilled. So that plant is riding the steepest degradation. The steepest part of that degradation curve, of course, is that first 3 hours. We do it in 3 minutes. So we can lock those nutrients in much sooner. And so the degradation just takes a lot longer to happen. I hear a squeak from time to time. I'm trying to find an area of the room where there's no squeak. But hopefully that answers your question. Perfect. Madam. Should be now.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. That was really inspiring. I'm interested in, you started with this vision of, 1.1 billion people hungry. So how do you feel, this vision, as you've kind of put it into practice, can get at those issues of hunger? I mean,
Absolutely.
is this something that is only going to be catering to those who can afford it, and then the supply chains that cater to those populations, or how do you see that connection?
First of all, the West is where we start. Hardware innovation is so hard and takes so long to get to the economies of scale that you have to start with a premium market. There's no doubt about it. So we're not shy about that. We would prefer to just jump straight into the population that needs it right now, but it's not going to work that way. Two things. Number one, the biggest problem with malnourishment is not macronutrient deficiency. It's not the proteins and the carbs and these kinds of things. There's a much, much smaller, still massive, a much, much smaller portion of the population is macronutrient deficient. And those pictures are as ugly as you can imagine. But per volume, the larger problem is micronutrient deficiency at the bottom and the top. So the larger problem to solve in this case, in terms of the number of people, is micronutrient deficiency. So the short answer to your question is we are riding a cost curve that is very significant. And in the future, farms are going to be in those locations growing products that are profitable in collaboration with greenhouses, in collaboration with traditional farms. It's going to be a combo of the three. So yes, absolutely, we are going to solve those problems. It's going to be food, but it's also going to be medicines as well. But it's just going to take time. Unfortunately, we have some time.
Thank you. There's a couple online, and I'll just read them to you. One is from Sarah El Said. It's, as humans whose health has co-evolved in collaboration with microbes, I wonder if these plants will also co-evolve to have beneficial microbes and to ensure the long-term health. So you answered that a bit, but That's
Yeah.
one. And I add the second one because it's pretty straightforward. Currently, do you receive any federal funding? Are there any areas, great, thanks. Are there areas of research that you see ASU partnering with you on implementing solutions? That's Anne-Marie Hess, so both online.
Perfect. So I'll answer the second question first. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it's similar when you talk to family offices about where they should play in the capital markets. It's a unique place, I think, that universities should play as well. Deep research, of course, I think should occur in universities where maybe the commercial viability isn't seen in the next 5 or 10 years. That research is ultra important still. But where I think the universities will be most useful is the introduction of new crops and new geographies. So much of business is connections, who you know and where your business grows. I think that's part of it, but the main place where I think the interplay between organizations, our organizations and the universities is definitely on the new crop introduction and new geography. First question I forgot.
Microbes.
Oh, good. Yeah. So we already introduced beneficial bacteria into the system. So the plants aren't devoid of all microbes, like your mouth, for example, has good and bad microbes. So we still have microbes in the system, but they're just much more controlled. I am not a plant scientist. I find that area unbelievably fascinating. So I'm not going to speak with any authority at all with respect to the microbiome of these plants. But just so you know, so the audience knows, so far as I understand, roots don't actually eat from the soil. Roots eat from the fungi that exist on the root, and then they consume what the fungi create. So that interplay between those two organisms, those two organism classes, and forgive me if that's not exactly how it works, but super fascinating. So hopefully I answered that question at least poorly.
That sort of does the answer. Any other questions in the room and or online?
There you go, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have two questions. The first question is your the stuff you grow considered organic, or could it be?
Yes.
Okay. It is organic in and of itself, or it could be organic.
As of 2021, I believe it was legal for vertical farms, aeroponic farms in specifically to produce organic product. It's just about certifications, essentially.
Okay. And then the second question is, we see farms, they're vast, they're miles and miles, it looks like.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to quantify this, but your average farm, I don't know how big it is.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the average size farm, if we average the two farms, you're talking probably somewhere around 10,000 square feet. We have a couple of different product offerings. We have an entrepreneur farm that's very small, where an entrepreneur can bring this technology, more or less franchise the business and bring the produce to that location. And then we have industrial farms. For example, there's a huge state in the United States where we're potentially going to have a 150,000, 200,000 square foot deployment. So it really just depends on the use case.
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess where I was going with that question was, your average traditional farm is X number of acres.
I don't know the answer to that question. 60% of the world's calories come from 5 crops: corn, wheat, soybean, rice, these kinds of crops.
Okay, so where I'm going with this question is, how do you compare the size of what you have in Avondale to acreage, and how that compares to farm that's out there?
Sure. So if 15,000 square feet is a third of an acre is about 45,000 square feet. That produces, depending on the crop, about 150 times. So that's 50 acres. 50 acres and 15,000 square feet. Yeah. Depending on the crop.
Fine. And this is, I'll edit it a bit. So given such a clean environment, could the produce that you safely package and could produce that you're safely packaging be consumed without washing by the consumer?
That's correct. Yeah. So, I mean, we have a little bit of a cheeky saying here, which is you make it dirtier when you wash it. The produce is edible straight out of the box. A lot of product is triple washed because you're dealing with the outdoors, but our product does not need to be washed. Eat it straight from the clam. Madam.
So I do a lot of work in schools, and I'm wondering what the smallest possible unit could be. Could you put these in every school?
Both of our parents are teachers, so we have somewhat of an affinity. Our system is probably too complex. Let me say that a little bit better. There are solutions that work at a very small deployment. Our system is optimized for automation. So if you have a system that's 100 square feet, you're still going to be paying for robots and cameras and hubs. So there is a sort of economies of scale on the negative end. We bring kids through for tours all the time in our facility in Avondale. And we've done a couple of online things as well. But I think, there are other solutions that I can connect you to that are in situ, like small deployments for schools. But ours is probably too large of a CapEx, I would think. Where I think it's going though, in the future, I think all communities, all neighborhoods are going to have their own vertical farm to get to the personalized farming bit. So hopefully they can be close enough to connect there.
Have you thought about working with the USDA for the farm to school program to feed different schools with your technology?
I'm not smart enough to read those bills to see what we can take advantage of and how we can partner, but we do have a lot of people who are smart enough to read those bills and go through them. 40% of all farm income is from the US government. So I'm sure there's something there. Our business has to stand on its own 2 feet without any government support whatsoever, and then the government support could potentially come in later. But it's another small frustration that we have with government spending so much money on farms is you're artificially pricing innovation out. It becomes 40% harder from a price perspective for us to be able to compete with that. So anyway, I know there are opportunities for us to work with the government, and I think we should, and I think we will. We just haven't identified them too much yet. Their head's been in the forest. Thanks, guys.
Congrats on the patent, by the way.
Oh yes, I know, madam.
Okay, so you guys were delving into potatoes and root veg and things like that typically grow underground eventually, right? And then you had also mentioned that 5 crops are what feed most of humanity and all of the animals that we eat. At what point do you think that you're going to dive into grains? Because grains are really the crop that's the issue that we're having.
Yeah. So first of all, aeroponics was invented by NASA in 1970s to grow root crops on the space station. So this is designed to grow root crops. So that's not, in terms of producing the plant, that's not too much of a problem. If you can buy 8 pounds of potatoes for $3 at Costco, that's the problem. It's a very, very complex issue. The fact that 60% of the world's calories ultimately come from those 5 crops. When you're eating meat, you're still eating that produce. 30% of water consumption in California is to feed those animals. That's not optimal. We got to this point out of necessity. It's fantastic that people have access to calories. It's no judgment in the past. But in the future, micronutrient deficiency obviously is becoming the problem. So I don't think it is the role of vertical farming to grow those products. Today, in my opinion, next 5 or 10 years, I think that will continue to be true. Outdoor farming still has a significant role in the future of feeding people, and there are hundreds of businesses focused on doing that. So I don't think that necessarily the world's potatoes or carrots are going to be coming out of vertical farms. I think they'll continue to come out of the traditional farm, barring some massive event where it can't occur, or if we're on a different planet. But I don't think. I think introducing plants that are micronutrient dense is the solution, as opposed to continuing to grow those macronutrient dense plants. But I'm 29 and an idiot, so don't listen to me. Anyone else? Sir.
Thank you. In terms of facility expansion, are you going to grow longitudinally, or you be able to go vertically and have a 10-story building?
So we did a lot of analysis on this. The cost of the real estate square footage is a relatively low rank order cost. So going way taller doesn't necessarily improve your cost of goods sold significantly much at all. Now, something that looks great is a different story. So there are lots of real estate companies, guys in Vegas, guys in Scottsdale, along the 101 next to Talking Stick. Oh, we're like 2 years away from having a vertical farm there. Anyway, the technology partner that we're working with now can go way, way higher. And so we can go way higher. It all just really depends on the customer. There is a version of this technology that's greenhouse, by the way. So it really just depends on the use case and what the customer wants. So.
I don't know if this is a question or a statement, and maybe you won't have an answer for it either, but I'm wondering that question about downscaling it and how the opportunity is to downscale and make it cheaper and affordable.
Yeah.
Because there's millions probably tens of millions of smallholder farmers around the world.
That's right.
And what's the implication of this technology for all those folks whose livelihoods are dependent on those small farms?
Yep.
For self-sustenance for their families, but then they're starting to get into connecting to markets, growing
Yes.
more. But what's
I agree.
the challenge for them?
I mean, so if you look at, there's a great graph that shows number of farmers and average size of farm since the early 1900s. During World War II, at the end of World War II, it inflected. So you had many, many farmers with small farms. World War II inflected that. Consolidation, many fewer farmers with much larger farms. I don't know which is the natural state of play. The latter is probably more efficient from a resource perspective, but maybe it's a romantic dream, but I think that we may end up going back in the other direction. I don't know what the long-term trajectory of corporations look like. I haven't read that book. But to answer your other question, we're developing a solution that is sort of called the entrepreneur's solution. So as opposed to Sprouts or Wegmans or Amazon wanting to build a 250,000 square foot facility, we would have an entrepreneur that wants to build a 2,000 square foot facility and introduce those crops to a school or to a local community. So we are actually working on that product for $500,000. We kind of think about it like this. Everyone in the US has the opportunity to fix their own car and change their own oil and have a tool shop in their own garage. 5% of people do. Most people, in my opinion, really don't care that much about what we do. They really don't care too much about the product that's coming out of our facility. So our idea is, yes, there are solutions that can be produced for 100 square feet that will educate kids. There's a place for that. The hardest part, I think, for us as a business is saying no. That's really been the hardest part for us. So saying no to that solution is something that we necessarily have to do. But that $500,000 solution, essentially what we want to do is, if you want to be a franchisee, rather than doing a Wendy's or a McDonald's or a Dunkin' Donuts, you'll make more money with our system. That's where we want to get to, because again, the market will just naturally shift that way. That's our goal.
One,
Family farm compete with the corporate farms.
With specific crops and specific geographies, yes. With expanding boundaries. So right now, we can sell one of those $500,000 entrepreneur farms to an organization on the East Coast or maybe up there in Canada, and they will be able to compete with the large corporations in terms of price of production and quality of product and zero seasonality, yes. And what you'll see over the next 10, 20 years is that the radii of market viability will constantly be expanding. It'll start to make sense in North Carolina and then Florida and then Texas, and then soon you'll start to see it in Arizona and California, straight up beating the outdoor farm on economics with specific crops. So caveated, yes.
here's one critical one online, the
Yeah,
last
mate.
one online, and maybe we'll close out with one in the room. But
Sure.
let's do the last one online. Super important, actually. So with the bulk of your vertical crops being done by robots,
Yes, sir.
what sort of workforce do you need to manage these farms, and do these jobs require advanced degrees?
Some of them do, some of them don't. I think there are still going to be on-site in data centers that have even fewer functions than we do. There are still people on-site performing functions. So we still will have people on-site performing functions. But much like the ATM, people thought the automated teller machine was going to kill banks. Far more bank tellers than there used to be, right? So I think it's a similar thing. The nature of the job is going to change. And that's why we talked a lot of ag schools is, touching and feeling a leaf may not be the way it's done in 10 years for a vertical farm at least, right? So there's a huge shortage in that labor, low skilled labor and high skilled labor, if I'm still allowed to say that in 2022, but finding individuals that know the system and can understand the data, good luck. Good luck. I mean, not to say there aren't high quality people. Go down to Cal Poly, you'll see 1 million incredible horticulturists, plant scientists, and so forth. We need to train them on our system. We need that. I think we need that sort of education line to have at least one class of data analytics. They probably already do, but data analytics on a UI that's online. Anyway, I think that's
Good answer.
the solution. Yeah.
Privilege of the room. Final question in the room.
Anybody? You haven't asked this question, mate.
No pressure.
Oh, good.
Well, Sam, I want to thank you
Oh, my pleasure, mate.
so much.
My pleasure.
Wonderful. This, I think, is the essence of what the Walton Sustainability Solution Service is about, not just presenting these ideas, but really giving the fora for the criticism and engagement, the back and forth, to think about how we can really scale. I've been saying to sectors and sovereigns on the planet, but I'll give a nod to thinking about the interplanetary solutions. So thanks a lot. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you
Yeah.
guys very much.